Hi, today I'm going to give you a lesson to try and unpick how to understand Shakespeare. So I was first introduced to Shakespeare at school and I found it really alienating and confusing because I didn't understand the text. Everyone would laugh at all these bits and I didn't know why because it didn't make any sense to me. So I found tools to try and help find a way to figure out what he's saying, because once you figure it out, you unlock the key and it's just amazing and the writing's so beautiful. So once you figure it out, it's really great. So hopefully these help. So the first thing I want you to do is read through the text. You want to stop at every new thought. So the new thought can be implied by a question mark, like here, or a full stop, like here, or an exclamation mark, but there isn't one in this one. So full stop, question mark, exclamation mark, because the comma, the semicolon, and the colon all signify continuation of thought. So it's nothing fresh. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the text, and to visually see it, we're going to put a dash like this at the end of every new thought. So let's get started. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? New thought. New breath. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou oust, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growst. New thought. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So as you can see, there's only 3 new thoughts in this entire piece, so not many. So that can also tell us a lot about the person who's speaking. So if there's long-winded thoughts and everything's kind of drawn out, that can tell us who's saying it, what they feel. It's kind of like a long-running thought sentence, which is quite interesting in itself. So the next thing to do to try and help you understand it more is to go through it and translate it and be so specific. Don't assume that you understand anything. If something feels weird, look it up in a dictionary. Look in a good dictionary. I really recommend Oxford Concise as being a good one to use. So you go through it, and I'll show you what I've done a glossing. It's called a glossing when you go through and you kind of translate it, for lack of a better word. So this is my glossing, but obviously we can work through it together and unpick it, and if something doesn't feel right, we can always change the word to make it more understandable. So let's look through it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So what I take from that is, shall I compare you to a summer's day? Asking permission. Can I, shall I, could I compare you to a summer's day? Also tells us about who's speaking it. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. You are lovelier and milder than a summer's day. Summer's day is what? Beautiful. So can I compare you to a summer's day? Even if I did compare you to the summer's day, you are more beautiful and more mild. You're perfect, right? Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Rough winds shake the pretty buds of May. So in May, things bloom and the winds shake them. But you don't shake like that. And summer's lease hath all too short a date, and summer doesn't last nearly long enough. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines. Now the eye of heaven in Shakespeare means, what do you think it could mean? The sun. So there's a very useful textbook that you can look at called, I've written it down here for you, Brewer's Guide to Phrase and Fable. So this is a book that when we get things that seem a bit weird and we don't really understand what they mean in our modern day, we can look in this book and it will kind of give us what allusion, so what it means then, and we can then translate that to what it means now. So instead of the eye of heaven, we can say the sun. So sometimes the sun is too hot. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines. Does that make sense? And often his gold complexion dimmed, and often its gold face, so the sun's, is darkened by the clouds, because that's what gets in the way. His gold complexion is dimmed by the clouds. and every fair from fair sometime declines, and everything beautiful stops being beautiful, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed, either by accident or simply in the course of nature. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, but your eternal summer will never fade. So you will always be summer. You'll never become winter, or the leaves will never fall. They'll always stay on the trees. It won't be autumn. That's what it means. Nor lose possession of that fair thou oust, nor will you lose possession of your beauty. Your beauty will always be there, like the trees, like the summer. It will always stay. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, nor shall death brag that you are wandering in the underworld. So even in your death you will still be beautiful, is what they're saying there. When in eternal lines to time thou growst, once you are captured in my eternal verses. So it's talking about the poem, this poem itself. It's talking about that and saying, even if you die, you will stay alive in my poem, once you are captured in my eternal verses. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, as long as men are alive or have eyes of which to see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. This poem will live and keep you alive. So there's kind of 3 parts to this poem. We have the first part, which is all about describing what she looks like, because this is a love poem, is what I've taken from this kind of translation, and looking at it deeply, I think it's a love poem. What do you think? So there's 3 sections. We have the descriptions of what she's like, being like sunshine and never changing, and death will never take you. So we have here one section, and here another section, and then a bit about the poem. Does that make sense? So the poem, kind of looking at it retrospectively and being like, this is what will keep you alive. So I think that's really interesting, and it shows the reader and the writer wants to show you that they know they're writing a poem, and that's the way they're giving you their love. So now what I want you to do is read through the translation with feeling, like you really mean it, and that will help you find a way to figure out when you go back to the text how to really mean it. So let's give it a go. Shall I compare you to a summer's day? You're lovelier and milder. Rough winds shake the pretty buds of May, and summer doesn't nearly last long enough. Sometimes the sun shines too hot, and often its golden face is darkened by clouds, and everything beautiful stops being beautiful, either by accident or simply in the course of nature. But your eternal summer will never fade, nor will you lose possession of your beauty, nor shall death brag that you are wandering in the underworld. Once you are captured in my eternal verses, as long as men are alive and have eyes with which to see, this poem will keep you alive. And this poem will live and keep you alive. So that's what I've understood from the poem. So that's my translation. Yours might be slightly different. That's okay. Just put the words that feel right to you to make you understand it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the original text and try and read it. And if there's ever moments where you feel like the meaning is slipping, go back to your glossing, go back to your translation and pick it apart again and put it back together. So one way to help us read it with feeling is what I want to do is I want to underline every noun and highlight every verb, because those are the key words in the sentences. So if we find a way that we can, I'll show you. I've done it here for you. So these are all the nouns and these are all the verbs. So what we're going to do is go through and choose if it feels right, those are the right words to emphasize. You're not going to emphasize shall. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day feels a bit weird. Whereas shall I compare thee to a summer's day might make a bit more sense. So you don't have to stick to these, just pick the ones that feel right to you or whatever feels right. So let's go through it one more time with all of that in mind. We have done the translation, we've looked through it in detail. Now let's see what we've got, okay? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often in his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of the fair thou oust, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growst. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So hopefully you're beginning to find a little bit more sense in that. And again, if things feel weird, go back to your translation. Go back and see where it feels uncomfortable, because maybe you need to tweak the translation a bit to help you understand it. But writing out the translation and looking through them next to each other is a really useful way of starting to get to grips with it. And once you've figured out what it means, you're good to go. And you can apply this to any piece of Shakespeare text you want. I hope that was useful, and thank you so much for listening.